Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Jida. Welcome to my YouTube channel. First of all, please follow, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Today our topic is pulse modulation. Analog pulse modulation, digital pulse modulation. Analog pulse modulation, pulse amplitude modulation PAM, pulse width modulation PWM, pulse position modulation PPM. Digital pulse modulation, pulse code modulation PCM, delta modulation DM. Advantage of pulse modulation: transmitted power is no longer continuous as in CW modulation but pulsed in nature. Vacant time between pulse occurrence filled by interleaving multiplexing pulse waveforms of some other message TDM. Sampling theorem. This provides a mechanism for representing a continuous time signal by a discrete time signal, taking sufficient number of samples of signal so that original signal is represented in its samples completely. It can be stated as a band-limited signal of finite energy with no frequency component higher than fmHz is completely described by its sample values which are at uniform intervals less than or equal to 1 over 2 second parts where Ts is sampling time. Sampling frequency must be equal to or higher than 2 fmHz. A continuous time signal may be completely represented in samples and recovered back if Fs greater 2 fm, whereas Fs is sampling frequency and Fm is maximum frequency component of message signal. Three types of sampling techniques: impulse sampling, obtained by multiplying input signal x into t with an impulse train of period Ts, also called ideal sampling, practically not used because pulse width cannot be zero and the generation of impulse train not possible. This type of sampling, natural sampling. This type of sampling similar to ideal sampling except for the fact that instead of delta function now we use rectangular train of period Ts, multiply input signal x into t to pulse train. An electronic switch is used to periodically shift between the two contacts at a rate of Fs equal 1 over Ts Hertz, staying on the input contact for c seconds and on the grounded contact for the remainder of each sampling. The output xs into t of the sampler consists of segment of x into t, and hence xs into t can be considered as the product of x into t and sampling function t. Flat top sampling. During transmission, noise is introduced at top of transmission pulse, which can be easily removed if the pulse is in the form of flat top. Here the top of the samples are flat. They have constant amplitude and is equal to the instantaneous value of the baseband signal x into t at the start of sampling. Hence it is called as flat top sampling or practical sampling. Flat top sampling makes use of sample and hold circuit. Theoretically, the sampled signal can be obtained by convolution of rectangular pulse h into t with ideally sampled signals. Aperture effect. Spectrum of flat-topped sample is given by this equation shows that signal G into T is obtained by passing the signal S into T through a filter having transfer function H into F. Figure shows one pulse of rectangular pulse train and each sample of is convolved with this pulse. Figure shows the spectrum of this pulse. Thus, flat top sampling introduces an amplitude distortion is a reconstructed signal x into t from g into t. There is a high frequency role of making h into f act like a LPF, thus attenuating the upper portion of message signal spectrum. This is known as aperture effect. How to minimize aperture effect? An equalizer at the receiver end is needed to compensate aperture effect. The receiver contains low pass reconstruction filter with cutoff slightly higher than FMH's HZ. Reconstruction filter, equalizer, message signal. Equalizer in cascade with reconstruction filter has the effect of decreasing the in-band loss of reconstruction filter frequency increases in such a way so as to compensate aperture effect. Pulse amplitude modulation PAM. Amplitude of the pulse carrier varies proportional of the instantaneous amplitude of the message signal. The width and position of the pulses are constant in this modulation. PAM could be single polarity PAM. A suitable fixed DC base is added to the signal to ensure that all the pulses are positive. Double polarity PAM. In this the pulses are both positive and negative. At the end, please follow, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.